McGraw Show on KTRS.
936, Big 550, KTRS. John Deal looking for a Democrat to override Governor Nixon's veto. That's why he's not here. Actually, we don't know why he's not here. He called in last second, said he couldn't make it. Jane Duker's with us. Also, Tony Messenger. Tony, Jay Nixon vetoed the tax cut. What are your thoughts?
Well, the amazing thing to me is that the Republicans in the state legislature are so poorly led by Speaker Tim Jones and to a lesser degree by our friend John Deal, that they gave Jay Nixon this incredible gift. If you remember last summer when they passed the tax cut and the governor vetoed it, and the governor went out and went from school district to school district in Republican areas and stood with superintendents and teachers and others and said, you can either cut taxes for the wealthy or you can fund schools, but you can't do both. And he won that fight, and he got on the front page of the New York Times, and he was the Democratic governor in a Republican state who beat back their idiotic bill. This year, they've done the same thing. They've passed a watered-down version that is still horrible, might actually be worse because they might have accidentally gotten rid of the entire income tax after a couple of years. And then the day before the governor vetoes it, Moody's, the credit agency, issues a report on Kansas that lowers their bond rating because of the tax cut bill that they passed that Missouri is now trying to emulate. It's the gift that keeps on giving for Jay Nixon. There is no way they override his veto. They may try to do something silly again at the end of the session to try to repass it again. But it just amazes me that they talk and talk and talk about schools. They won't fully fund the school foundation formula, but instead they're going to continue to try to give a tax cut to the wealthy and almost nothing to the middle class and the poor. And it's mean, and it's bad public policy, and it's bad economics. But because Rex Sinquefield wants them to do it, they're going to keep trying.
Tony, what's this story we're hearing that Democrats, if this veto is overridden and this tax cut goes into effect, the Democrats are threatening to cut the tax on highways?
I haven't heard that.
It's bargaining.
I can't imagine, and I'm not in the Capitol every day, but I can't imagine that they actually have the votes to override the governor, because the tax bill, even if the governor's wrong and he's relying on a Wash U law professor's analysis, even if he's wrong that it doesn't actually get rid of the income tax and therefore destroy state government, it's bad enough as it is. It cuts state revenue by about $600 million a year by the time it's coming in. That's how much we're underfunding schools right now. And we're just going to make it worse. Schools are never going to get funded in this state if this bill passes, and that's why there's no way it gets overridden.
Jane Duker.
Well, I mean, I think the Democrats are making noise because they need some Democrats to get the highway tax passed. So I do think that that's probably some of the leverage that they're referring to. Now, whether that'll come to pass, sometimes when you put two different things together, that bargaining power, it tends to get a little strange. But and I agree with Tony. This is horrible policy. This is what's disturbing, is they have no idea. There's no studies. There's nothing out there that indicates that this will have any positive effect. They say, well, of course, if you cut taxes, job creators. Well, I mean, we've already learned trickle down doesn't work. I mean, every notable economist has said it doesn't work. So now Kansas is a real problem for them because it's a mess over there. It's a joke. And now they're saying, oh, well, but this isn't Kansas. Well, it was Kansas before, and we didn't want to, be outdone by Kansas.
Let me hold up John Deal's flag for a moment. If he were here, he would say that the tax cuts do not go into effect until revenue grows to a point of $150 million more than the current revenues today. So there's no tax cut unless revenues are growing. What's so terrible about that?
Well, and
that's the best part of Governor Nixon's veto message. There's a paragraph in the veto message, and if you follow my Twitter feed at @TonyMess, I've linked to it if you want to go find it. There's a paragraph in the veto message that says this: if the tax cut is so great, if the Republicans believe in it so much that it is going to turn around the economic fortunes of the state, why did they delay it for 2 years?
Right.
They contradict themselves.
Right.
If Missouri needs economic growth right now, and they're convinced that this tax cut is the way to go, why do they delay it for 2 years? They contradict themselves. But secondly, as it relates to that $150 million, so let's say revenue grows by $150 million, and then they proceed to cut revenue by $600 million. So the net loss to state government is massive.
And there's
All
only
it is a trigger that says, well, we're only going to do it if the economy is growing. But then the act of what they do kills the economy. It's fundamentally, it's almost unbelievable that there are enough Republicans in Missouri that either never took an economics course or that just simply don't care. Rex Sinquefield told them to do it, so they're going to do it. It doesn't matter what's happening in Kansas. It doesn't matter what Missouri's 30-year history of being a low-tax state actually shows in terms of economic growth. None of the facts matter. They've got a donor that says you're going to do this, and so they're going to jump as high as he tells them to jump.
Now, last year, the Senate sustained the veto, right? They didn't have it.
Yes.
Republicans did not come home. They lost some Republicans. They voted
in the House, the flimsy 15 in the House.
All right. So this year,
they've got the flimsy 15.
Deal needs one Democrat.
Correct. All he needs is one Democrat. He says he's got all of his Republicans, and they all stood up. I mean, the flimsy 15, the Republicans that he lost last time have come home, at least for the time being. Now, I think that's one of the reasons why they wanted to do this in session, so that Governor Nixon and others don't have time to go out and sort of tell the public what this is about. So they're trying to, keep everybody in the building and keep them tight and close. And so I think if you presume that he's got all of his Republicans, he needs one Democrat.
Does he have
and one Democrat has voted for it. Now, the key is whether Jeff Rorta, who's running for Senate down, in Jeffco area, whether he will stay with his vote that he did on the original bill or whether he will, go with the governor. And then, you can't assume that there aren't other Democrats that might change. I mean, so, it's possible.
Tony,
it's possible.
Does he have it?
I don't think you can assume that every Republican votes for it at this point. I just don't think you can. Not with the information that just came out of Kansas, not with the information about the bill possibly accidentally erasing the entire income tax. I refuse to believe that every House Republican is that dumb.
Well, don't. Stay tuned.
All right.
I wish I was as hopeful as you were.
Please send all your Twitter comments to @TonyMess. There you go. We have 3 minutes left. Tony Messenger on Skype, Jane Duker here in studio. Can I just say that Eric Schmidt sits on the board for Nurses for Newborns, so I've made a pledge never to criticize anybody who supports Nurses for Newborns. But the fact that he stood up on the floor and gave an impassioned plea for his child who is suffering from seizures, who needs hemp oil, so riveting the speech that it passed the Senate, it passed the House, and now it sits on the governor's desk.
And while Eric was a rock star, his wife was the real witness rock star.
Fantastic. What about the St. Peter's alderman who is suffering from leukemia, whose doctor tells him he needs to smoke marijuana so he can keep the food down so he doesn't starve?
Right.
They don't care about him. Since
he doesn't have a family member who's an elected official down in Jefferson City, they don't care about his medical needs.
What about the poor kid whose parents can't get insurance right now because nobody in that Senate will stand up and give a courageous speech? And they're spending whatever food stamp money they have trying to decide whether or not to get the medication that might keep that kid alive or feed that kid. What about that kid? When's the Senate going to stand up and give a passionate speech about that kid? That's what I want to know.
Well, and I agree with you, but I'm not going to say that I disagree with it because it's right. It's just not going far enough. I mean, this idea that, we're doing slow growth Obamacare, starting to put mandates in every year so that they can say they're not implementing Obamacare. These mandates that insurance companies cover certain things and allow certain things. I mean, it's like they will do anything to avoid the real topic, which is we need health care for our citizens.
If Eric Schmidt's kid had a pre-existing condition and could not get insured, would he fight for that? And the answer is yes, because they did that with autism.
Because it's the right thing to do.
But they forced the insurance companies to cover
Pay for autism. Right.
So why autism and not sickle cell anemia?
And,
Why
and
autism
chemotherapy.
And not, right.
They did the oral chemotherapy this year. I mean, that's why I said we're doing a slow burn on mandating that insurance companies cover the things that Obamacare says they should cover. And, they don't want to admit that this is what it is.
It's so sad. It is so sad.
It's awful.
Tony, last word.
I love the bill.
I do
think
too.
It's a great bill.
Right.
I'm glad they passed the bill. I wish they would just admit that what they basically did was set the structure up for legalizing marijuana, which ultimately will be great for this state and ultimately will help lots of other people and be great for the agricultural economy. I wish they would just admit that that's what they did, and I wish they would also stand up for poor kids, not just their own kids.
But there are doctors who would like to prescribe medical marijuana for people who are not allowed to because the state legislature is in that hospital room with you telling the doctor what they can and can't prescribe, which is exactly what they're criticizing the Obamacare deal.
That's what makes it so funny. I mean, that's the hypocritical part about this.
Tony Messenger, thanks for checking in via Skype. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.
Good to see you.
Tony Messenger. Jane Duker, ladies and gentlemen, former Chief of Staff of Governor Holden. Have yourself a lovely weekend.
I will.
You got it. Boardwalk Hardwood Floors, ladies and